After the reformatory released me, I followed a map my mother had hidden. The farm was still waiting. For 2 years, the world had been concrete walls, fluorescent lights humming a tune of despair, and the measured cadence of guards' footsteps on polished floors. Freedom wasn't a soaring feeling, it was a physical shock, like stepping out of a dark room into the blinding sun. The air was too big, the sky was too open. I stood outside the gates of Northgate Juvenile Correctional Facility, a place that had scraped my name, Leo, down to a number. I was 18 years old, an adult by law, a ghost by every other measure. In my pocket was a flimsy manila envelope, the only thing that had been waiting for me in the property office. It felt impossibly heavy, a dead weight against my thigh. If this sounds like a story you need to hear, a story about finding your way back from the edge, stick around. Like and subscribe, because this channel is for those of us who know that sometimes the only way forward is to go back to the beginning. We're all just trying to find our way home. The bus ride was a blur of smudged greens and browns through a dirty window. I hadn't seen a tree that wasn't contained by a fence in 24 months. Now a whole forest rushed past, and it felt like an accusation. Every mile put more distance between me and the structured misery of Northgate, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like falling. In the system, your days are planned to the minute. Wake up, line up, eat, work, learn, lock down. There are no choices, which means there's no room to make the wrong one. Out here, every intersection was a question, every passing stranger a potential threat or a forgotten friend. I clutched the envelope in my jacket pocket, the paper softened with the sweat of my palm. It was all I had left of her, my mother. The memories of her last year were fractured and sharp, a mosaic of slammed doors, wild-eyed whispers about people watching the house, and the cloying smell of burnt food on the stove. They called it a psychotic break. I just called it the end. The social worker had handed me the envelope the day they took me away. "She left this for you," she'd said, her voice dripping with a pity that felt worse than anger. "She said to give it to you when you were old enough." Old enough. As if age had anything to do with understanding the chaos she'd left behind. I didn't open it for 2 years. It sat in my file, a sealed mystery I was too afraid to solve. What if it was just another rambling, paranoid note? What if it was empty? The not knowing was better than another confirmation that the mother I remembered from my early childhood, the one who smelled of soil and sunshine, who taught me the constellations, was gone long before she actually died. But on my 18th birthday, the day before my release, a guard slid it under my cell door. Time's up. I sat on my cot, the thin mattress a poor excuse for comfort, and carefully tore the seal. Inside, there was no letter, not at first, just a single old-fashioned brass key, heavy and ornate, and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it under the weak light. It was a legal document, a notice of lien against a property I'd never heard of, but it wasn't the typed words that held my attention. On the back, in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, was a map. It was a childlike drawing of roads and landmarks, a crooked oak tree, a collapsed bridge, a red mailbox. An X was marked over a small, hand-drawn square labeled The Homestead. And below the map, a single sentence: "Find the North Star, Leo, it's all there." Forgive me, the address on the lien was for a place called Black Creek, a rural township hundreds of miles north. The key, the map, the cryptic message. It was the last piece of her, and as broken as she had been, it was a direction. It was more than I'd had in years. The bus lurched, pulling me from my thoughts as it slowed for a stop. I was still hours away from Black Creek, but with every mile a terrifying, fragile seed of hope had begun to sprout in the barren ground of my chest. Maybe she hadn't just left me with chaos. Maybe she had left me a destination. The final leg of the journey was on foot. The bus dropped me at a crossroads with a gas station on one corner and a boarded-up diner on the other. The sign for Black Creek said it was another 4 miles down a cracked asphalt road that disappeared into a tunnel of dense, overhanging trees. The air here was different. It was thick with the smell of damp earth, of pine needles, of rain that had fallen hours ago. It was the smell of my mother's garden, a scent I hadn't realized I'd forgotten until it hit me. And for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My duffel bag, containing one change of clothes and the paperwork of my release, felt heavier with each step. Cars were infrequent, their drivers slowing to get a better look at the boy with a state-issued haircut walking down the side of their road. I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on the crumbling pavement. The map was a ghost in my mind. I passed the crooked oak tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal arms. I crossed a shallow stream where a bridge had once been, the stones now just a jumble in the water. The landmarks were real. This place was real. After what felt like an eternity, I saw it. A faded red mailbox leaning tiredly on its post, almost swallowed by overgrown weeds. The name on the side was nearly illegible, but I could just make out the letters, Hale, my mother's maiden name. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I turned onto the gravel driveway. It was more of a path, really, 2 ruts carved into the earth and disappearing into a thicket of thorns and wild brush. As I pushed my way through, the property revealed itself, and my fragile hope withered. The house was a skeleton. The paint had peeled away in long strips, leaving the wood beneath gray and weathered. The porch sagged dangerously, and several windows were boarded up. To the left, a large barn leaned at an angle that defied physics, its roof a patchwork of missing shingles and gaping holes. The fields that stretched out behind it were a sea of tall brown weeds. It wasn't a homestead, it was a ruin, a monument to neglect. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Of course, this was her legacy, a broken-down house at the end of a forgotten road, another dead end. I almost turned around right there. I could walk back to the crossroads, stick out my thumb, and disappear. The state gave me $100 and a bus ticket. I could use that to get lost somewhere, start over where no one knew my name or my story. But then my fingers brushed against the key in my pocket. Find the North Star, Leo. Her voice in my memory, not the frantic, scared one from the end, but the one from long ago, pointing up at the night sky from our tiny apartment balcony. It's the anchor of the sky, she'd said. If you're ever lost, just find the North Star. It'll show you the way home. I wasn't a kid anymore. I didn't believe in magic or easy answers, but I had walked this far. I had to see it through. With a deep breath that tasted of dust and decay, I walked up the groaning steps of the porch and slid the heavy brass key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, solid clunk. The door swung inward on a long, low groan, opening into a world of shadow and silence. The air inside was stale and thick, smelling of dust, mice, and something faintly floral like dried lavender. A thick coat of dust lay over everything, a soft gray blanket preserving the scene beneath. Motes danced in the single beam of light that cut through the grime on a window. It was like stepping into a photograph. Furniture huddled in the center of the living room, draped in white sheets like a gathering of ghosts. I pulled back a corner of one, a floral sofa, worn but clean underneath the dust, a solid wood coffee table. It was all old, but it was good. Cared for. This wasn't the home of someone who had given up. This was the home of someone who was planning to come back. I moved through the downstairs, my footsteps unnaturally loud in the profound silence. The kitchen was small, with faded yellow countertops. A calendar on the wall was still turned to August, 4 years ago, the month she died, the month my life fell apart. My throat tightened. I forced myself to keep moving, to think of this not as a tomb, but as a puzzle. Find the North Star. It wasn't just a sentimental phrase, it was an instruction. I started looking for it. I checked the walls for paintings, the bookshelves for titles, the floorboards for markings. Nothing. I went upstairs, the steps creaking under my weight. There were 2 bedrooms. One was small and empty, save for a single mattress on the floor. The other was clearly hers. A large 4-poster bed, also draped in a sheet. A vanity with a dusty mirror. A rocking chair in the corner. And there, on the rough-hewn floorboards, half hidden under the edge of a faded rag rug, was a small painted star. It was no bigger than my thumb, a simple 5-pointed shape in what was once bright blue paint. The North Star. My breath caught. I knelt, my knees cracking, and my fingers traced the painted shape. It was real. This was the spot. I pushed the rug aside. The floorboards around the star looked just like the others. I pressed on them one by one. Nothing. I ran my fingers along the seams, feeling for a loose edge. One of them, right at the tip of the star's uppermost point, shifted slightly. My heart leaped. I dug my fingernails into the crack and pried. The board came up with a soft groan of old wood, and there, nestled in the dark space below, was a small rectangular metal box. It was heavy, made of dark steel, with a simple lock on the front. Beside it lay a sealed envelope with my name on it, written in her hand. My hands trembled as I lifted them out. The dust motes swirled around me, witnesses to a secret held for 4 long years. I sat back on my heels, the cold metal of the box in one hand, the crisp paper of the envelope in the other. The silence of the house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. I decided to open the letter first. The words were the key. The box was just a container. I slit the envelope open with my thumbnail and unfolded the pages within. The handwriting was neat, controlled. It was the handwriting of the mother I thought I'd lost long before she was gone. "My dearest Leo," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and it means you are finally 18. I hope the years have been kind. No, that's a lie. I know they haven't been, and for that I am so sorry. More sorry than you will ever know. There is so much I have to explain, and so little time on this page. The first thing you need to know is that I was not crazy. I was sick, yes. The cancer came back. But the paranoia, the fear, the things that made you look at me with such confusion in your eyes, that was real. They were real." I had to stop reading. My eyes burned. Cancer? She'd never told me. The doctors, the social workers, they'd all talked about mental illness, a breakdown brought on by stress. No one ever mentioned cancer. It was a lie. It was all a lie. I forced myself to continue reading, my vision blurring. This farm, Leo, this was my family's home, the Hale homestead. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place to escape the city and the people who were hounding me. A company called Viridian Holdings wanted this land. They want all the land in this valley. They plan to build a resort, a playground for the rich, and they don't care who they have to destroy to get it. They started with offers, then threats. When I wouldn't sell, they began a campaign to ruin me. They filed frivolous lawsuits, forged debts, made my life a living hell until my every waking moment was consumed with fear. I knew my time was short because of the illness, and I was terrified they would take this place from you after I was gone. The letter went on to detail a quiet, desperate war I had known nothing about. She had been fighting not just a disease, but a faceless corporation. The frantic behavior I'd witnessed wasn't madness. It was the terror of a woman trying to protect her son's future, while her own was slipping away. "The box," the letter continued, "contains what I could save. It's not much, but it's enough to give you a start. A choice. The key to the box is where a home's heart should be. You were always so good at puzzles, my love. Use the money to run, Leo. Disappear, change your name, live a quiet life where they can never find you. That is all I have ever wanted for you. Please do not try to be a hero. I tried, and it destroyed me. Just be safe. I folded the letter, my knuckles white. A choice. Run or what? Stay. Fight for this ruin? The anger was a hot lump in my throat. Anger at Viridian, at the social workers, at the whole world for letting this happen. But mostly, I was angry at myself for believing she was just another tragic story, for not seeing the fight behind her fear, where a home's heart should be. The phrase echoed in my mind. I looked around the dusty room, then my eyes fell on the fireplace against the far wall. A large stone hearth, cold and black, the heart of the home. I scrambled over to it, my hands searching the rough stones, the soot-covered bricks inside. Tucked away on a high ledge inside the chimney flue, my fingers closed around another, smaller key. It was cold and slender. It fit the lock on the metal box. With a click, the lid sprang open. My breath hitched. It was full of money, stacks of $100 bills, neatly wrapped in rubber bands. I didn't count it, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Tens of thousands of dollars. Beneath the cash was a small leather-bound folder. I opened it. Inside was a birth certificate, not mine, hers, and the name on it wasn't Sarah Hale. It was Sarah Connolly, and beside it, another envelope, thicker this time, with the single word proof written on the front. She had given me a choice, but she had also given me a weapon. The weight of it all pressed down on me, heavier than the silence, heavier than the dust. The money was a tangible thing, a promise of a different life. I could walk out of this house, leave the key on the table, and never look back. I could go to a city where no one knew my name, get an apartment, a job, maybe even go to college. I could be anonymous, I could be free. The thought was intoxicating. It was a clean slate, the thing every kid in Northgate dreamed of. No past, no record, no ghosts, just cash and a future. I pictured it, a small, clean apartment, a steady paycheck, the simple peace of being left alone. It was everything I thought I wanted, but then I looked around the room. I saw the care with which she had draped the sheets over the furniture. I saw the little painted star on the floor, a secret message of love from a mother to her son. I felt the weight of the second envelope in my hand, the one marked proof. She had fought for this place. She had fought for me. Running felt like a betrayal. It felt like letting them win. Her fight would have been for nothing. Her sacrifice would be a footnote in a real estate deal. The anger I'd felt earlier began to cool, hardening into something else. Resolve. It was a foreign feeling, a stiffening in my spine I hadn't felt in years. I looked at my reflection in the grimy vanity mirror, a pale, thin kid with haunted eyes and a haircut that screamed institution. But for the first time, I saw a flicker of someone else in that reflection. I saw a hint of Sarah Hale's son. Listen, if you've made it this far, you know what this moment feels like. The one where you can either run from your past or turn and face it. It's the crossroads where the easy path and the right path diverge. Have you ever had a moment like that? A choice that defines who you are, not just what you do? Let me know in the comments. It's important we know we're not alone in these fights, that our stories are shared even when we feel isolated. Now, let's get back to the farm. I made my choice in the quiet of that dusty room. I wasn't going to run. I didn't know what fighting back would look like, but I knew I had to try. I took one stack of the $100 bills from the box and put it in my duffel bag. The rest I put back, closing the lid and placing the box back in its hiding spot, beneath the floorboards. This wasn't getaway money anymore. It was a war chest. My first act as the new master of the Hale homestead was mundane. I walked the 4 miles back to the gas station, The man behind the counter, a grizzled old-timer with a name tag that read Earl, watched me with weary suspicion as I bought a bucket, sponges, cleaning supplies, and a box of protein bars. I paid with a crisp $100 bill, and his suspicion deepened. "You the one staying up at the old Hale place?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I just nodded. "Heard someone was poking around," he said, handing me my change. "Place has been empty for years. Sad what happened to Sarah." The way he said her name, with a familiar sadness, sent a pang through me. She wasn't just a ghost to everyone. I walked back, the bucket handle digging into my palm. The simple physical act of carrying something with a purpose felt good. Back at the house, I started cleaning. I filled the bucket with water from an old hand pump in the backyard, the water coming out rusty at first, then clear and cold. I started in the kitchen. I wiped down the yellow counters, scrubbing away years of grime until the original color shone through. I washed the windows, letting in the late afternoon light. It was hard, repetitive work, and my muscles, softened by institutional idleness, ached. But with every swipe of the sponge, I felt like I was reclaiming something. I wasn't just cleaning a house, I was erasing the neglect. I was pushing back against the decay. I was making a statement to the ghosts and the memories. I am here now. This place is not abandoned. As I worked, I thought about the second envelope. Proof. I had left it in the box, not yet ready to face it. The first letter had already upended my world. I needed a moment to just be, to exist in this new reality before diving deeper. That night, I slept on the bare mattress in the small bedroom. There was no electricity, so when the sun went down, the house was plunged into a profound rural darkness. The only light was the moon, casting long, skeletal shadows through the clean windows. The silence was absolute, broken only by the chirp of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. It should have been terrifying. After 2 years of sleeping in a room filled with the snores, coughs, and quiet sobs of 30 other boys, the silence was a physical presence, but it wasn't menacing, it was peaceful. It was the sound of solitude, not isolation. For the first time since I was a child, I felt completely and utterly alone. And for the first time, it felt like a gift. The next morning, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I retrieved the thick envelope marked proof and sat on the porch steps, the early morning sun warming my face. Inside was another letter and a small spiral-bound notebook. I read the letter first. "Leo," it began, "I'm sorry to put this burden on you, but if you've decided to stay, then you need to know the whole truth." The notebook is a start. It's a copy of the records I kept, detailing every interaction with Viridian, dates, names, threats. But it's not the original. The original, along with other evidence, is safer, stronger. Remember our secret stories, the ones we made up about the knight and the dragon. Remember where the knight kept his magic sword? My mind flashed back to bedtime stories. My mother would weave tales of a brave knight protecting his small castle. The dragon was a metaphor for her bosses, I realized now. And the sword. The knight never kept it in the armory. That was too obvious. He kept it in the foundation of the watchtower, the strongest part of the castle, disguised as a simple stone. The barn, the leaning, dilapidated barn, was the watchtower. And in the letter there was one more thing, a name and a phone number. "Mr. Abram, he's a lawyer in town. He's the only one who believed me, the only one I trusted. If you choose to fight, he's your only hope. Be careful, Leo, they are watching." A shiver went down my spine despite the morning sun. They are watching. The paranoia in her last days wasn't paranoia at all. It was justified fear. I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous energy. I needed to get the power on, to have lights, to have a link to the outside world. I used some of the cash to buy a cheap, prepaid cell phone at the gas station. Finding Mr. Abrams' office was easy. It was the only law office in Black Creek, a small, tidy brick building on the town's main street. The sign was faded, Abram and Son, attorneys at law. The "and Son" was painted over. I hesitated on the sidewalk for a full 10 minutes before pushing the door open. The man who sat behind a massive oak desk was old, probably in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice dry as autumn leaves. "I'm looking for Mr. Abram," I said, my own voice sounding thin and young. "You've found him," he said, not unkindly. "I'm Leo," I said, my throat suddenly dry. "Sarah Hale's son." Mr. Abrams' expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, of sorrow. He gestured to the worn leather chair opposite his desk. "I was sorry to hear about your mother," he said, his tone formal but sincere. "She was a fighter." "She told me to find you," I said, getting straight to the point. "She said you were the only one who believed her." He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning. "I believed her because I've seen it before. Viridian Holdings has been buying up this valley for a decade. They come in with lowball offers, and if you refuse, they find other ways. Liens, code violations, cutting off access to water. They bleed people dry until they have no choice but to sell for pennies on the dollar. Your mother was the first one who decided to document it, to fight back in a real way. He confirmed everything, the fraudulent debts, the harassment. He told me Viridian had already filed a motion to foreclose on the property, to seize it from her estate. They think the estate is empty," he said. "They don't know about you. You're turning 18 and showing up here. It throws a wrench in their plans, but they won't give up. They'll come after you now." The words hung in the air between us. "They'll come after you now." "My mother," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She left evidence. She said it was in the foundation." Mr. Abram leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "If you can find that, Leo, if that evidence is what she claimed it was, you might not just save your farm, you might just save this whole valley." I left the lawyer's office with a renewed sense of purpose, but also a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. This was real. It wasn't just about reclaiming a memory anymore. It was a genuine fight with a powerful, unseen enemy. Mr. Abram had given me some advice. Act normal. Get the power on. Buy groceries. Let them think you're just some kid squatting in his mom's old house. The longer they underestimate you, the better. So that's what I did. I called the power company and arranged to have the electricity restored. I spent the afternoon clearing the path to the barn, hacking away at the thorny brush with a rusty machete I found in the shed. The work was grueling, and every snap of a twig in the woods made me jump. I felt exposed, watched. Was it just my imagination fueled by my mother's letters, or were there really eyes on me? The barn was even more imposing up close. It was huge, far bigger than it looked from the house, and it smelled of hay, rot, and time. The main doors were barred from the outside by a thick piece of timber. I heaved it aside and pulled the massive doors open. They scraped against the ground, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. Light streamed in, illuminating a scene of organized decay. Old farm equipment stood silent and rusted. Stalls lined one wall, empty. A hayloft loomed above, shrouded in shadow and cobwebs. It was the foundation I was interested in. A solid wall of large gray fieldstones, cool and damp to the touch. It ran the entire length of the barn. Where to even begin? My mother's clue was about the knight's sword, hidden in plain sight. Disguised as a simple stone, I started walking the length of the wall, running my hands over the stones, pushing on them, looking for anything that seemed out of place. It was a long shot, a child's story guiding a desperate search. Most of the stones were solid, cemented firmly in place. Hours passed. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the barn floor. Dust motes danced like tiny golden insects. I was about to give up, convinced I had misunderstood, when my hand brushed against a stone that felt different. It was smoother than the others, and the mortar around it seemed newer, less crumbled. It was at about chest height, no different in size or color from its neighbors. I pushed on it. It didn't budge. I pushed harder, putting my shoulder into it. Nothing. Frustrated, I slammed my fist against it. It wasn't the force that did it, but the vibration. The stone shifted inward just a fraction of an inch. My heart hammered. I wedged my fingers into the tiny gap and pulled. The stone slid out with a grating sound, revealing a dark rectangular cavity within the foundation wall. My hands, trembling, reached inside. My fingers brushed against something wrapped in oilcloth. I pulled it out. It was a package, heavy and dense. I carried it over to the wide barn doors, into the last of the daylight, and unwrapped it. Inside was a thick, leather-bound ledger. Its pages were filled with my mother's neat, precise handwriting. It was the original, a meticulous record of Viridian's crimes, dates of threatening phone calls, transcripts of conversations, copies of fraudulent invoices. It was a bombshell, but that wasn't all. Beneath the ledger was another letter, her last one, and a small shoebox filled with cassette tapes. I opened the letter first, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read. "My beautiful boy," it began, "this is the last thing I will ever write to you, and it is the hardest. If you have found this, you have found my heart, my anger, and my deepest shame. There's one more thing you need to understand, Leo. The most important thing. I need you to know why I let them take you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Let them take me? I remembered that day with sickening clarity. The social workers at the door. My mother disheveled, ranting about conspiracies, her eyes vacant. She hadn't fought for me. She hadn't even seemed to notice as they led me away. The betrayal I'd felt that day had been the cornerstone of my grief for years. "They threatened you, Leo," the letter continued. "A man from Viridian, a Mr. Graves. He told me that if I didn't stop my investigation, something might happen to my son. An accident. He said the state was a deep, dark place where a troubled kid could get lost forever. And in that moment, I understood. I couldn't protect you if you were with me. I was a target. But if you were taken from me, if you were declared a ward of the state because your mother was unstable, they wouldn't be able to touch you. You would be in the system, registered, tracked. You would be safer in a cage they didn't control than you would be free with me. So I did the most monstrous thing a mother can do. I put on a performance. I stopped taking my pain medication. I stopped sleeping. I let myself become the crazy woman they wanted me to be. I let them take you, my love, because it was the only way I could save your life. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted, the barn walls seeming to ripple and warp. The carefully constructed narrative of my life, the story of an abandoned boy whose mother had lost her mind, shattered into a million pieces. She hadn't abandoned me. She hadn't broken. She had sacrificed herself, her reputation, her last precious months on earth to build a wall around me. The reformatory hadn't been a punishment. It had been a sanctuary, a desperate, brutal, last-ditch act of love. I collapsed against the barn wall, the letter clutched in my hand, and I wept. I cried for the years I had spent hating her, for her weakness, when I should have been in awe of her strength. I cried for the scared, confused boy who was led out of his apartment, believing his mother didn't want him. And I cried for her, for the unimaginable pain she must have endured, alone in this house, fighting a war no one could see, knowing her son thought she had betrayed him. It was a storm of grief, years of dammed-up pain breaking free. When the tears finally subsided, a profound, aching calm settled over me. The guilt I had carried for so long, Guilt for being angry with her, guilt for surviving when she didn't, was washed away. In its place was a love so fierce it felt like it could burn the whole world down. I picked up one of the cassette tapes. It was labeled with a date from just a few weeks before I was taken. With trembling hands, I found an old portable cassette player in the shed, its batteries miraculously still holding a faint charge. I put the tape in and pressed play. The hiss of the tape was followed by the sound of our old kitchen phone ringing. Then my mother's voice, strained but steady. "Hello?" A man's voice, smooth and cold as a snake. "Sarah, it's time to stop. I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Graves." "I think you do," the voice purred. "You have a fine boy. Leo, isn't it? It would be a shame if he had an accident on his way home from school. A real tragedy." There was a long silence. Then my mother's voice, barely a whisper but laced with steel. "You stay away from my son," he laughed. "The choice is yours, Sarah. The farm or the boy. You can't keep both." The tape clicked off. I sat there in the fading light, the man's voice echoing in my ears. "The choice is yours. The farm or the boy." She chose me. She had given up the farm to save me, and in doing so, had left it for me to find. The inheritance wasn't the land or the money. It was the truth. It was this story. It was the impossible weight of her love. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Abram's office and placed the ledger, the shoebox of tapes, and the final letter on his desk. He looked at the items, then at my face. My eyes were red-rimmed, but my expression was set. I was no longer a lost kid. I was Sarah Hale's son, and I was here to finish her fight. He spent the next hour reading the letter and listening to the tape of Mr. Graves. His face, usually a mask of calm pragmatism, grew darker with every word. When he finally looked up, the weariness was gone, replaced by a cold fire. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "This is the smoking gun. This isn't just a civil case about property fraud anymore. This is criminal conspiracy, extortion, racketeering." He explained the plan. The evidence was enough to get the district attorney's office to open a criminal investigation into Viridian Holdings. The tapes, the ledger, and my mother's meticulous notes were irrefutable. He also said that with this proof, we could file a class-action lawsuit on behalf of all the other families in the valley who had been forced out by Viridian's tactics. "This is going to be a long, ugly fight, Leo," he warned me. "Viridian has deep pockets and powerful lawyers. They will try to discredit you, to discredit your mother. They will paint her as an unstable, vindictive woman. They will paint you as an opportunistic delinquent." "Let them try," I said, and the words felt solid, real. "My mother died to protect this story. I'm not going to let them bury it." The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. I gave a formal statement to investigators from the DA's office. Mr. Abram filed the lawsuit. The story broke in the local paper, then got picked up by a regional news station. "Orphan takes on corporate giant to save family farm." It was a good headline, it just didn't capture the half of it. Viridian's lawyers responded exactly as Mr. Abram predicted. They filed motions to dismiss, claiming my mother was mentally ill and that her evidence was the product of paranoid delusions. They tried to subpoena my juvenile record, but the tapes were undeniable. The ledger was meticulous, and slowly other families began to come forward, emboldened by my mother's courage. The old farmer who had been forced to sell after his well was mysteriously contaminated. The family who lost their land over a mountain of fabricated code violations. My mother's lonely fight became a community's stand. I didn't stay in the courtroom. My place was at the farm. The legal battle would grind on for months, maybe years. My war was here in the soil, in the wood, in the light. The power was on now. The house glowed with a warm, welcoming light at night. I spent my days working. I repaired the sagging porch. I replaced the broken window panes. I tore out the rotten floorboards in the kitchen and laid new ones. I bought a second-hand truck with some of the money from the box. I drove into town for supplies, and people started to nod at me. Earl, the man at the gas station, gave me a free coffee one morning. "Your mom would be proud," he said gruffly, and I had to turn away so he wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. I started in the garden first. It was a tangled mess of weeds, but the soil underneath was rich and dark. I tilled the earth, my hands sinking into the cool dirt. It felt like shaking hands with my ancestors. I found the faint outlines of my mother's old vegetable beds and began to clear them, to bring them back to life. I planted seeds, tomatoes, zucchini, lettuce. Simple things, things that grow. One afternoon, as I was weeding, Mr. Abrams' car pulled up the driveway. He got out, looking less like a lawyer and more like a neighbor. He handed me an envelope. "It's an offer," he said, "from Viridian. They want to settle. They'll drop the lien, give you clear title to the farm, and offer you a substantial sum of money. In return, you drop the lawsuit and hand over the ledger and the tapes." It was the easy way out. A clean victory. Everything I had fought for, handed to me on a platter. I would have the farm, free and clear. I would have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But the class action suit, the one for all the other families, would be dead. The criminal investigation would likely wither away. Mr. Graves would walk free. "What do you think I should do?" I asked him. Mr. Abram looked out over the fields, at the work I had started. "Your mother could have sold this place a dozen times," he said quietly. "She could have taken the money and run. She stayed because it was never just about the land. It was about right and wrong." He didn't have to say another word. I knew my answer. "Tell them no," I said. "We're not settling. We're going to win." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his whole face. "I was hoping you'd say that." The fight is not over. The legal battle continues to this day, a slow, grinding process of motions and depositions. But we are winning. The criminal investigation has led to indictments. The other families are going to get their day in court. And me, I'm still here, at the farm. The house is no longer a ruin, it's a home. The fields are no longer choked with weeds. This spring, I planted my first real crop of corn. The barn still leans, but I've reinforced the foundation. It's strong enough to stand. My inheritance wasn't the farm, not really. It wasn't the money in the box. My mother's inheritance was a story, the true story. It was the knowledge that I was not abandoned but protected, that I was not the son of a broken woman but of a warrior. Home, I've learned, isn't a place you are given. It's not a deed or a title. It's something you build. It's something you fight for. It's the choice to stay when it would be easier to run. It's the act of planting a seed in soil that others have called barren. It's the decision to honor the sacrifices of those who came before you by living a life of purpose. My mother taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when it feels hopeless, even when you're alone. She taught me that the truest strength is found not in the absence of fear, but in acting despite it. What's the inheritance that was left for you? I don't mean money or property. I mean a lesson, a strength, a story that shaped you. Share it in the comments below. If these kinds of stories matter, if you believe in second chances and fighting for what's right, then join this community. Subscribe. Because every story of survival, every quiet act of courage deserves to be heard. And you are not alone in your fight. Whatever it may be, you are not alone.